Today's video is going to be on trimming. That's the second stage after you've thrown something. So we've thrown some bowls, and we're going to take those bowls and trim it. So we're going to end out with a bowl that looks like this when you threw it. Has all this extra clay down here. And we're going to trim off the extra clay and make it look finished like that. So that's trimming. I'm going to use a couple props during it. This is one of my favorite. This is a bowl that I made and cut in half. And it kind of shows you what trimming is about, what gets cut away, okay? So to get started, you need to get yourself tools, okay? The tools for trimming are slightly different than for throwing. You need a sponge, a needle tool, two trimming tools, a large one, a small one, a slug of clay, and a bucket of water, okay? As you sit down on the wheel, you need to set yourself up just like you did when you were throwing. Make sure your chairs move forward, your legs are straight up and down, and now we're good to go. Okay, so remember you're going to be trimming on the wheel, and as we showed in the throwing video, wheels spin in both directions. Your power buttons here to turn on and off. Right now this wheel is spinning in the counterclockwise position, which is good for a right-hander. If you're left-handed, you want to push this button and make this wheel spin in the other direction. So when you get ready to trim, you're going to put some marks on your bowl. I'm going to show you how to put marks on with this cutaway. I think it makes it easier. So we're cutting off this clay. You need a mark on the bottom to tell you where the floor and then the wall begins. So you're going to take your bowl, you're going to hold it upside down in your non-dominant hand. You're going to take your needle tool and you're going to put a scratch on the bottom where the floor ends and the wall begins. And then you're going to put another scratch about 3/8 of an inch away to the other side. And between those two scratches, you're not going to cut. By not cutting between those two scratches, you will end out creating this thing here, which is called the foot. Okay? So, after you get the scratch on the bottom, you're going to put one more scratch on there. And that has to do with the walls. You're going to put a finger on the inside and outside, run your fingers down, and where it starts to get wider, you're going to put a little scratch. And those two scratches are really going to make your trimming, give you some information about trimming. All right, here's a bowl with the marks on it that are needed. I'm going to go ahead and put that on the wheel head to begin trimming. So the first thing you have to do when you put it on the wheel head is get it centered. So you don't want the bowl over here, you can't trim it. You'll notice if I put it over here and I spin it, it goes whoa, wobbly like that. So you try to get it as close to center as possible. The lines on the wheel head should help you get it there. But we use one other tool, and that's our needle tool. The way you make sure it's in the middle is you take your needle tool, and you're going to hold the needle tool right in front of yourself. And you're going to move it towards the piece of ceramics real slowly. And it's going to start scratching, and then you stop. And wherever you see the scratch, this one scratch from about here to here, that means the bowl's a little too far that way. So very carefully, because this was pretty close, I'm just going to move it a little further this way. I'm going to spin it again. And that looks pretty darn centered. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it pretty close to the center, okay? All right. Now we're ready to start trimming. All right, so we've got the bowl in the middle of the wheel head, and we're ready to start trimming. So you're going to take your clay, slug of clay, remember this is just recycled clay. You're going to roll it so it's kind of not too thick, not too thin, about this thick. And you're going to put two pieces on one side, two pieces on the other side, and you're just laying them there. If I push one side without the other, I could cause the bowl to slip. So what I'm going to do is get my hands in on two of the pieces at the same time. Kind of count 1, 2, 3, and then squish it down. Turn to the other ones and squish it down. So now my bowl is held to the wheel head, and I can start the trimming process. All right, so what trimming involves is cutting off extra clay. You marked it. You know what you have to cut off. You start with the smaller trimming tool. You're going to hold that in your hand, and you're going to hold it real tight. The tighter this is, the less movement, but you're not going to push too you're not going to be pushing really hard. You're just real light. You're going to hold your right hand or dominant hand with your other hand, and you're going to be cutting like this. You do not want the tool pointing this way. You want laying it flat against the side. And as you put it there, you'll see if you hold your hand nice and tight and move real slow, it's going to slowly start cutting off all of the extra clay. So you remember from the cutout what we were trying to cut out. Most of that clay is right down here. The mark on the side tells me I don't have to cut anything off here, I just have to cut it off the bottom. So your first pass of cutting, you're going to cut away all the clay till you get to the outside mark. So we had our 2 marks. I'm now at the outside mark. Okay? This has a very thin bottom, but we're going to cut just a tiny bit off the bottom to let you see what that looks like. Now you're going to hold it kind of like a pencil, point in the center, and slowly just cut tiny bits of clay, and you're going to stop at the first mark. I stopped a little before it, but that's okay. So now between the 2 marks is where your foot is, and then the rest is the clay. I know this pot is pretty thin, so I don't have a lot of extra trimming to do, but I do want to put the dent in the side. Remember, when I throw my bowls, I always have a dent right here at the bottom. So if glaze is up here and it's running down, it'll run down here and puddle there as opposed to run and stick to the shelf. So I want to get that dent in there. So the way I get the dent is I just take my trimming tool and I hold it and let it cut for a little while, and now there's a dent. So when you've trimmed your bowl and you kind of like the shape, said I like this shape, now you're ready to take the larger trimming tool and smooth out a lot of the cut marks. It's just going to hold it here. I'm going to push it against the clay. A lot of those little marks from cutting will disappear. Okay? Smoothing out the shape, kind of making it even. I'm going to take the same tool and holding it like this, or however it's comfortable, do the same thing in the center. You know, you can use this tool to straighten out the edge. If the bottom bothers you a little bit, do that. But pretty soon you're going to have a shape that you're happy with, and you've cut off most of the extra clay. When you get to that stage, you're going to take your sponge and dip it in water, squeeze out most of the water, and put it onto the bowl, and it's going to smooth out even the last of the little marks, okay? Smoothing out the last of the marks. All right, when you're done trimming your bowl, you then are going to take your needle tool and you're going to write your name on the bottom and a date. These bowls are going to belong to you, and you will have to, like with every other project, attach something to the outside. Trimming ends out making the bowl even softer than it was before you started. So to remove it from the wheel, you're going to take off the slugs. And you want to lift this real carefully. So I always put 2 hands, one on either side. And then I lift it, I turn it over, I put it back on the project board, and voila, a trimmed bowl.